Hi all, welcome to the video lecture series of object-oriented programming. In this video lecture, we will be discussing about the topic vector classes. We all know what an array is, right? An array means it's a collection of elements of same data type. That is what we have studied, and we all know the drawback of an array, isn't it? We know that an array is having only fixed size. We cannot change the size of the elements while the program is running, or at running time it's not possible to change the size of the an array, right? So in order to avoid that drawback, Java have introduced something known as a vector class. So vector is like the dynamic array. That means it can grow or it can shrink depending upon the functions we have performed. If you have declared a vector of certain size, say 5, it is possible to change that size while during the running time of the program. Change size means it can be reduced or it can be increased. So a vector is a kind of dynamic array. So since it is dynamic, we can store n number of elements. There is no size limit as in the case of the array. So I hope you understood the difference between vectors and an array. Okay, and vectors belongs to Java collection framework. There is something known as Java collections. Okay, vector is one among them. We have other collections like array list, list, etc. We have to study array list, what an array list is, but it's another module. So vector is also a part of the collection framework provided by Java. So since vector is a class, naturally a class does not have any meaning if we are not creating any objects, right? Class has got its existence only when we create objects. Similarly, we can create objects of class vector and we can use that objects. So to create objects we need constructors. So these are the 4 different constructors available for the vector class. So as we can see here, since these are constructors, naturally the name of these methods will be same as that of the class. See, the name is vector, vector, vector and vector. So 4 methods or 4 constructors with same name. There is no meaning in saying that it is having the same name, because it's a constructor means it will be having the same name as that of the class. But there are 4 vectors or 4 constructors with a different parameter list. So what does that mean? Yeah, it means it is overloading. So instead of method overloading, here it is constructor overloading, because it is the constructor that is being overloaded here. What is method overloading? More than one method with the same name but different parameter list. That is known as method overloading. Here we have more than one constructor with the different parameter list. That means it is known as the constructor overloading. So when we have to use each of these constructors, that depends upon the program we are doing and depends upon the programmer. If we want to create a vector without any specific size, without any initial size, we can use this default constructor without any parameters. Okay, so in this case the size will be 0 initially. Okay, size is 10, initial size of 10. Now if we want to create a vector with our own specific size, if we have to create a vector whose size we know already, okay, whose initial size we know already, in that case we can use this constructor. So when we use this constructor, a vector with this size will be created. It doesn't mean that the number of elements that we can store is limited to this size. It is only the initial size. Okay, initially size of the vector will be this number, and as we include or add more elements into the vector, the size will keep on changing. Okay, now about this constructor. This constructor has got 2 parameters. One is the size and second one is the increment, the step increment. Size, as I mentioned in this constructor, it is used to indicate the initial size of the vector that we have to create. Initially, how much size has to be there for that vector. That is what we mean by the first parameter. And second parameter is, suppose I have created a vector of size 5. That means I can the initial size of the vector is 5, and I added or I inserted 5 elements into that vector. So now initial size is over, right? I have declared a vector with size 5, and I have inserted 5 elements into that vector. So in the size that we have initially booked is over. Now if I try to include or add a sixth element, at that point of time the size of the vector will be incremented by this number. If I have mentioned this number as 2, when I try to insert the sixth element, suppose the initial size is 5 and this increment value is 2, suppose the vector is initially full, that means initial size is over. Okay, suppose the vector consists of 5 elements right now. When I try to include or add a sixth element, at that point of time the size of the vector will be incremented by this number, which is 2, as I have mentioned here in this example. Okay, so the increment specifies the number of elements to allocate each time that a vector is resized upward. So whenever we are trying to include an element that exceeds the initial size of the vector, then the number of locations by which this vector will be increased will be determined by this second parameter. Now if we have a collection like an array list or an already existing list, if we want to create a vector by using the numbers already in that list, we can use this constructor. So here the parameter of this constructor is actually a collection that already exists. A collection means again like an array or array list. We want to create a vector by using an existing array list, we can use this constructor. These are some of the methods available inside the vector class. If you want to add a particular element at a particular index, we have to use this method add, then the index at which we have to insert the element and the element to be inserted. So this element will be inserted at this particular index. If we don't want to specify the index at which we have to insert the element, just call the method add with the element to be inserted as the parameter. In that case the element will be inserted at the end of the vector. Okay, so here we can specify the location where we have to insert, but here if you are not specifying the location, then the element will be inserted at the end of the vector by default. Now if we have a list already, we have a collection, that means a collection of elements. We want to insert all of them into a vector, then we have to call the method add all. So this method is actually expecting an existing collection as the parameter, and all the elements in that collection means consider it as an array. For the time being, just consider collection means a collection of elements, that means an array. Okay, it's not exactly an array, but for simplicity just consider collection here, this parameter as an array. So we have an array of elements. If you want to create a vector, if we want to add all the elements in that array into a vector, we have to use this method add all. Okay, so all the elements inside this collection will be added to the end of the vector. Now if you want to, now as you can see, this method overloading here, we have two methods with same name but their parameter list is different. So what's the difference here? There is one more parameter here other than this, one index number is also there. This means all the elements in this collection will be added from this index. Suppose the index number specified here is 5, all the elements inside this collection will be inserted from index number 5 in the corresponding vector. We know that a vector is a dynamic array, right? So size of the vector keep on changing, it can be increased or it can be reduced. So suppose you want to know the current capacity of the or current number of elements of the vector, then we can use the method int capacity. So as you can see, the return type is int, so this method capacity will return the current size of the vector. How many elements are there in that vector, it will be returned by this method. Now if you want to clear all the elements inside the vector, if you want to clear the entire vector, we can use this clear method. So it does not return anything, but this method will clear everything from the existing vector, by which we are calling this method. So these are the methods inside the class vector. So we have to create the object of class vector, then only we can call these methods. So to create objects, we have to use vector space object name equal to new vector. That's a constructor. So see, this vector is actually it belongs to the util package, so we have to import that and see how we are creating. In this example, we are creating a vector of type string. So vector in angular brackets, we have to write type string, then this is the object name equal to new vector, and we are calling the constructor without any. See, we are calling the default constructor, we are not passing any parameter, so we are getting a vector with initially 10 as the size. Now we are calling the method add. See how we have to call the method add? By using the object. Object name is vec. vec.add tiger means this element will be inserted at the end of the vector. Since the vector is empty now, there are no elements, tiger will be the first element. Then we are adding lion. So lion will be added or inserted to the end of the vector. That means now the vector have tiger. So after tiger it will be lion, then dog, then elephant. Okay, so these are the methods that are available for vector class. Okay, now we have some other methods. Add element. Okay, this method is actually belonging to vector class. Sorry, this method is belonging to list, and add element is belong to the vector class. Okay, so both are doing the same thing, but they are different methods. Add belongs to list and add element belongs to vector. Since vector is a part of collection framework, there are some common methods available for every collections. Collection framework means it's a group of certain things like array list, list, vector, etc. So vector is also a part of collection. So there are some common methods available for array list, vector, list, linked list, etc. Okay, so these are the add method is one among them. Add method is common to list as well as linked list or array list, etc. So both add and add element both are performing the same thing. Okay, but the method add comes from the list class and add element comes from the vector. That's only difference, but both are doing the same thing, that is inserting the element to the end of the vector. Okay, so when we print like this, or we have to mention only the vector name vec. When we print this, the entire elements of this vector will be displayed like tiger, lion, dog, elephant, rat, cat, deer in this order itself. In this example, we are creating a vector of type integer, and see the vector object name is in. We are again calling the constructor without any parameter. So a vector with initial size of 10 will be created. Okay, and see how we are adding the elements. In dot add 100, so 100 will be inserted, then 200, 300, 200, 400, 500, 600, 700, all these elements will be inserted. Then we are printing in, so all these elements will be displayed. And see, we are using one method remove. This method is used to remove an element. So see, we are removing 200. Okay, actually this method remove is actually expecting an index number. Okay, this method remove actually expects an index number, but 200 is an element here, so we are converting that 200 number into an integer. We are saying that it's not an index number, it's actually a value of the value inside the vector. That is what we mean by integer here. So this remove method will search for this 200 inside this vector in. Okay, and the first occurrence of 200, we know that 200 here, the first occurrence of 200 will be removed from in, and all the other elements will be shifted one place back. Okay, now what else? In dot remove of 4, here we are given the index number 4. Okay, so index number always starts from 0, 0, then this 200 was removed, so 0, at first index it will be 300, then 2, then 3, and then 4. So we are removing 500. So when this 500 is removed, the 600 will be shifted to the 500's place, and 700 will be shifted to 600's place. Okay, so that's are some of the methods that are available inside the vector class, and this is how it's working. Okay, we shall conclude now. So we saw what is a vector class in Java, why we have to use vector class, because it is providing some advantages over arrays. It is avoiding the drawback of the array of being fixed size. Vectors are dynamic in size, and we saw some of the examples and some of the methods that are available in the vector class. That is all in this video lecture. Thank you so much.